Not every catastrophe begins with an explosion. Some disasters open with silence, a silence so thick people mistake it for peace. And in that exact moment, when the world believes it is finally safe, when the greatest fear has just been buried, something even more terrifying is drawing closer than ever. Picture a world that has just crawled out of the worst nightmare in human history. The Dajjal has been killed. The greatest deceiver, the one who shook the faith of millions, the one who turned truth and falsehood inside out, is gone. Prophet Isa, the son of Maryam, has descended. Justice is established. The remaining hearts of the believers finally release a long breath after years of fear. People tell each other the greatest trial is over, and that is the most dangerous moment for humanity, Somaks, because history has never ended where humans think it will end. Every time people believe they have crossed the final boundary of fear, they have only stepped into a new chapter, deeper, darker, and more carefully concealed. The greatest disasters do not arrive when the world is already in chaos, but when order has just been restored, when people stop watching, when the heart begins to believe, we are safe now. Welcome to Prophetic History Explained, where we do not just retell stories from the past, but face the truths humanity always tries to forget. After the death of the Dajjal, the world does not collapse right away. Instead, it becomes peaceful in a way that is unsettling. Flowers bloom again, crops recover, children return to the streets. Birds fill the sky as if they never disappeared. And humans, as always, adapt quickly to calm. They begin to believe this is the reward they earned after years of horror. But they do not realize some things are not destroyed, only delayed. Some threats do not vanish, they simply wait for the moment they are allowed to appear. Long before the modern world existed, Allah told humanity that not every evil is erased the moment it shows itself. Some are held back, like a warning postponed. Yajuj and Majuj are not a bedtime legend. They are part of humanity's destiny, hidden from sight, but never removed from the decree. When Dhul Qarnayn raised the barrier between two mountains, he did not close a door forever. He only extended time. That barrier was not the end of Yajuj and Majuj, but a pause in history. A delay wrapped in mercy. While humanity kept building, advancing, fighting for power, and convincing itself it controlled its future. Somewhere beyond every map, a threat continued to exist, multiply, and grow under Allah's perfect concealment. What makes this story frightening is not what Yajuj and Majuj look like, and not even how strong they are. The most terrifying truth is that humanity has lived for thousands of years beside a massive disaster without realizing it. No nation could track it. No theory could explain it. No technology could detect it. And that is the essence of the test. The most dangerous thing is not always where you are looking. While the world enjoys the feeling of we survived, destiny keeps moving, quiet, precise, and without emotion. The peace after the Dajjal is not proof humanity has won. It is the final warning before an even greater trial is released. A trial that does not target belief first, but targets life itself. It does not test who you trust. It tests whether you truly understand how small you are. If you feel a faint unease right now, if something in you senses this story is not only about the future, but also touching the present, that is not random. This is only the beginning, and what comes next will make the death of the Dajjal feel like a gentle warning. If you want to understand this story fully, if you want to know what is hidden behind the world's false calm, stay until the end of this video. And if these videos help you see history, faith, and human destiny more clearly, subscribe to Prophetic History Explained to support us so we can keep bringing deeper, more honest stories in the videos ahead. There is a truth humans struggle to accept. Not every threat is destroyed when it appears. Some dangers are allowed by Allah to remain, not because He is unable, but because humanity must be tested through waiting. And Yajuj and Majuj are the clearest symbol of that delay. When Dhul Qarnayn appears in the stream of history, he does not arrive as a bloodthirsty conqueror or a king drunk on power. The Quran does not paint him through dramatic victories, but through something else. Allah gave him the means to accomplish what needed to be done. That means Dhul Qarnayn's strength was not in swords or armies, but in acting correctly within the limits Allah allowed. He did not decide the world's destiny. He carried out a small part of a far greater plan already decreed. When people cried out under the devastation of Yajuj and Majuj, they did not run to Dhul Qarnayn as if he were a savior god. They ran to him as a means Allah placed inside history. And the way Dhul Qarnayn responded reveals the true nature of this story. He did not say he would eliminate Yajuj and Majuj. He did not promise a permanent victory. He built a barrier. A barrier not to end the story, but to hold it back. This is where many people miss the point. Dhul Qarnayn's barrier is not a symbol of humanity's final triumph over evil. It is a symbol of mercy through delay. Allah did not erase Yajuj and Majuj in that moment, because if He had willed it, nothing could exist for even a second. But Allah chose a different path. He held them back, concealed them, and let humanity continue living while the test still existed, only not yet released. What is worth reflecting on is that the barrier was not built from gold or some supernatural material beyond nature. It was built from iron and molten copper, things familiar to humans. But the strength of the barrier was not in the metal. It was in Allah's will. Because if it were only material, no structure could stand for thousands of years against a people who dig without stopping. The barrier exists because Allah wants it to exist, and it will fall only when Allah allows it. During all that time, Yajuj and Majuj do not disappear from reality. They do not sleep. They do not weaken. They multiply and increase inside a space hidden from the visible world. This is not a place science can discover, and it is not a land that can be pinned on a map. It belongs to al-Ghaib, the unseen realm humans are not allowed to access. And that is what makes the story more frightening than any horror image. A threat running parallel to human history, completely beyond human observation and control. This delay is not neglect. It is a subtle kind of test. While Yajuj and Majuj are held back, humanity is given room to live, to build, to believe, to betray, to improve, or to decay. Every generation benefits from that delay, and at the same time accumulates responsibility for the day the barrier is no longer there. Maybe the heaviest part of this story is not the power of Yajuj and Majuj, but the way people respond to Allah's delay. When a disaster does not show up, people start believing it does not exist. When they cannot see it, they call it a myth. And when they live in peace long enough, they begin to believe the order is permanent, that the world is in their hands. But the Quran and the Hadith remind us that some dangers cannot be measured by the length of time we have waited. The fact that Yajuj and Majuj are held back for thousands of years does not make them less dangerous. It shows that when their trial is released, it will arrive at the exact time Allah has decreed, not sooner and not later. Dhul Qarnayn's barrier is not only a physical structure, it is a message. It tells humanity your safety does not come from your own strength, but from Allah's temporary protection. And when that protection is lifted, no barrier, no matter how strong, can hold back what has already been written. In the next part of the story, we will see what happens when that delay ends. When a single shift, a single phrase tied to Allah's will, is enough to bring down a barrier that stood for millennia. And in that moment, humanity will understand it never truly controlled the destiny of this world. There is a moment in history when every idea of strength, effort, and time becomes meaningless. Not because people stop acting, but because they suddenly realize there are doors in this universe that do not open by human hands and cannot be locked by metal or mountain stone. They open only when Allah's will is mentioned, and they close only when He wills them closed. Thousands of years pass after Dhul Qarnayn's barrier is built. For human history, that is long enough for civilizations to rise, thrive, and crumble. Long enough for empires that thought they were eternal to become dust. But for Yajuj and Majuj, that time is not waiting in helplessness. They are not trapped in despair. They dig, not for a day or a year or a century. They dig through generations. Every day they move a little closer. Every day they approach the light they have never touched. And every day when they leave, the barrier returns exactly as it was, without cracks, without signs of weakness. Not because they lack power, but because Allah has not permitted it. This is what humans often fail to understand. We measure outcomes by effort. We assume if we push long enough, hard enough, intensely enough, every obstacle must eventually give in. But the story of Yajuj and Majuj exposes a different truth. Some limits cannot be crossed by effort alone if it is not tied to the will of the Creator. For millennia, the same pattern repeats. When the barrier is almost broken through, their leader says, "That is enough for today. Tomorrow we will finish." And every morning they return to find it as if it had never been touched. That failure does not make them stop. It becomes part of a destiny loop they do not understand. Until one day, what never happened before finally happens. There is no earthquake to announce it, no strange sign in the sky, no sudden change in their strength. The only thing that changes is a sentence. They stop as they always do, but this time the words do not end in blind confidence. They are connected to something they had never acknowledged before. Insha Allah. 2 words. But they mark the line between being held back and being allowed through. Not because Yajuj and Majuj suddenly become righteous, not because they grasp the depth of what they are saying, but because Allah has decreed the delay is over, and when Allah permits it, even an accidental phrase becomes the key that opens destiny's door. The next day, they return, and for the first time in thousands of years, the barrier is not restored. There is no spectacle in front of their eyes. Only this: what always existed to stop them is no longer being held in place. And as they dig forward, the light does not disappear. The barrier begins to collapse, not because it has grown weak, but because its reason for existing has ended. This is the moment the entire story turns irreversible. Not because Yajuj and Majuj have accumulated enough strength, but because Allah's will is now being carried out. What was hidden is now permitted to appear. What was restrained is now permitted to flood out. And no power in the universe can interfere once that decree has come. This carries a deep lesson for humanity. The barrier does not fall because humans forgot to be watchful. It does not fall because science failed. It does not fall because Yajuj and Majuj became smarter or stronger. It falls because the time has arrived. And when that time arrives, there is no such thing as too early or too late. Everything happens exactly as it has been decreed. This story forces humans to face a hard truth. Many things we call stability are actually temporary delay. Many walls we treat as permanent are standing only because Allah is still holding them in place. And the day they fall will not be the day we predict. It will be the day we cannot stop. From the moment the barrier breaks, history is no longer the history of waiting. It becomes the history of overflow. And humanity, even after being warned, even after being given time to prepare, will still be placed in front of a reality no one can handle by themselves. Because what comes next is no longer the story of a wall being broken. It is the story of a world facing the consequences of believing it was safe. When the barrier collapses, the world does not have time to understand what happened. There is no declaration of war, no announcement, no time to brace the mind. Only a brutal reality rising into view. Humanity has entered a stage where every familiar idea of strength, control, and safety stops working. Yajuj and Majuj do not pour out like an organized army. They do not come in ranks. They do not carry symbols. They do not divide into fronts. They appear like a flood bursting through a dam that has been held back too long. There is no front line because the entire earth becomes the target. There is no battlefield because every place becomes a battlefield. And there is no true concept of confrontation because no one is truly capable of confronting them. What shocks humanity is not only the speed of their spread, but the meaninglessness of every response. Everything people once believed was the foundation of power, armies, weapons, technology, national strength, begins to reveal its raw helplessness. Not because it is weak, but because it was never designed to withstand a trial released by Allah's will. As water grows scarce, as life is swallowed up, as social order collapses in a short time, humans are forced to face the most painful truth. They are no longer in control of anything. The first wave of panic quickly becomes something deeper, heavier. It is no longer fear of death. It is fear of total helplessness. No plan works. No strategy holds. Nations that once fought each other for dominance now look the same in their weakness. Borders that were once guarded like sacred lines become meaningless, because what is rushing forward does not care about skin color, nationality, or even identity. It does not need to conquer. It only needs to pass through. In that moment, the human instinct is to look for a leader, a solution, a decisive move that can turn everything around. But Prophet Isa, the one who stood against the Dajjal and ended the greatest trial of faith, does not lead a counterattack. He does not gather an army. He does not order a battle. And that confuses people even more. Because this is when humanity must learn a lesson it has always tried to avoid. Not every trial is solved by action. Some trials exist to force people to stop, to bow their heads, and to admit their limits. Prophet Isa does not say people must defeat Yajuj and Majuj. He says people must withdraw, find refuge, and pray. Not because retreat is cowardice, but because this is not a battle humans are permitted to fight. As the believers withdraw into the mountains, gathering whatever remains of life, the world below continues to collapse. Yajuj and Majuj spread across the earth. Rivers that once fed entire civilizations become dry. Lands that once overflowed with abundance turn into ruin. And in that destruction, people begin to realize the most terrifying part is not the strength of Yajuj and Majuj, but the fact that nothing they do can stop it. This helplessness is not only physical, it is spiritual. Humans are used to believing that if they try hard enough, they will find an answer. But in front of Yajuj and Majuj, that belief shatters. There is no more what if, no more if only reality unfolding, irreversible. And in that moment, dua is no longer the last option. It becomes the only option. Prophet Isa and those who remain turn toward the sky, not to ask why, but to admit every other door has closed. This is not the prayer of people who lost a battle. This is the prayer of people who finally understand their true position in the order of the universe. They do not ask for strength to win. They ask for deliverance because only Allah can end what Allah allowed to begin. And in that complete helplessness, a deeper truth is revealed. Humanity was never truly the owner of this earth. Humanity was only allowed to exist for a time that was appointed. When that time is tested, every illusion of control dissolves. And Yajuj and Majuj, in their role, are not only destroyers of life, but a mirror reflecting how fragile humans are before the will of the Creator. This is the point where the story becomes more than a historical event or a prophecy about the future. It becomes a direct reminder to every generation. A day will come when people face trials that cannot be solved by intelligence, technology, or strength. And when that moment comes, what remains is not what people have built, but the relationship they have with Allah. Because in a world where every wall has fallen, only one refuge is real, and not everyone is ready to step into it. When Yajuj and Majuj are destroyed, the world does not erupt in celebration. There is no victory song, no feeling of triumph, only a heavy silence covering the earth, as if the planet itself is trying to breathe after a long suffocation. That silence is not peace. It is the aftershock of something that exceeded what humans could bear. What remains after that is not glory, but the trace of an undeniable truth. When Allah ends a catastrophe, He does not need human effort, not armies, not strategy, not time. One command is enough. And Yajuj and Majuj, the ones who made the whole world feel powerless, collapse in an instant, not because they grew weaker, but because their role in destiny is finished. But that ending does not close the story. It creates a pause for humanity to look at itself. The earth must be cleansed. What is left behind after destruction must be carried away. Space must be made clean so life can continue, but not the way it used to. Because those who remain understand their existence is not automatic. It is mercy extended, not a right. During that time, other signs draw near. Not loudly, not in a rush, but unstoppable. A creature will emerge from the earth, not to slaughter, but to separate. Not to punish through violence, but to expose a truth hidden for too long. Dabbat al-Ard will mark people, not by appearance, not by status, but by the faith that has already been formed in their hearts. When that mark appears, there will be no more gray area, no more pretending. Everyone will be seen exactly as they chose to become. Then the sun will rise from where it has never risen before. An event that flips the natural order people assumed could never change. But the most terrifying part is not the event itself. It is the moment people realize the door of repentance has closed, not because Allah is no longer merciful, but because the time of choosing has ended. When truth becomes completely visible, faith is no longer a choice. And faith that is not chosen has no value. After that, a wind will come, gentle, painless, not carrying terror. It will take the souls of those who still have iman, so they will not witness the final stage of human moral collapse. And those who remain without that protection will live in a world emptied of morality, where evil is no longer hidden and numbness becomes normal. Upon them the hour will fall. All of this leads to a question no one can avoid. Not a question about timing, not a question about location, not a question about what the signs look like, but a question for each person, alone in their own silence. If everything can end this fast, what in this life is truly worth clinging to? The story of Yajuj and Majuj, when you follow it to the end, is not simply a story meant to spread fear. It is a mirror held up to humanity, reflecting how fragile the things we call stable really are. It reminds us this world was never promised as a permanent home. The strongest civilizations, the systems that seem impossible to break, and even the achievements that make humans proud, all of it can disappear when Allah's will is carried out. After Yajuj and Majuj are removed from the earth, people continue living. They eat, drink, rebuild, and enjoy restored blessings. But none of them can say they were not warned. No one can claim they did not know, because they witnessed what happens when the delay ends, when the curtain is pulled back, and when truth no longer leaves any place to hide. And that is the final value and the deepest message of this entire story. Not to make humanity guess when the world will end, but to make each person ask right now, while time is still being given. If today were the last day of delay, where would my heart be standing? Because at some point, no more story will be told. Only the outcome of choices already recorded. And when that moment arrives, the only thing that matters will not be what people accumulated, but what they prepared for the meeting they cannot escape with the one who holds every ending. The deepest lesson here is this: the most dangerous thing is not sudden destruction, but the long feeling of safety that makes people forget they are living on borrowed time. When life moves smoothly, when disaster is not knocked yet, people delay self-correction, delay returning to Allah, delay preparing for the Akhirah, telling themselves there is still time. But this story shows time is not something humans own. It is something they are loaned. Applying this lesson to your life today does not require anything beyond your ability. It begins with honest self-examination. Ask yourself, where is my faith when nothing is shaking me? Am I living with awareness or only on autopilot? Am I preparing for meeting Allah through daily action or only through intentions I never follow through on? Preparing for the Akhirah does not mean escaping life. It means living with the awareness that every small choice today is shaping tomorrow's outcome. If this story made you pause for a few seconds, if it made you see the world around you differently, you are not alone. Prophetic History Explained is built as a community for people who want to go deeper into prophetic history, the signs of the last day, faith, destiny, and the true meaning of human life in the light of the Quran and the Sunnah. Join the Prophetic History Explained community so we can learn, reflect, and prepare better for what is certain to come sooner or later. And if this content brings you value and helps you stay awake in a world full of distractions, subscribe to Prophetic History Explained to support us so we can keep producing deeper, more honest, more meaningful videos in the days ahead. Your support is how these reminders continue reaching hearts that need to be awakened.